I curled up in bed, wrapped in several blankets like a cocoon, but I couldn't shake the cold. My head was pounding. My throat burned as if I'd swallowed a mouthful of gravel. Outside, the wind howled with that bone-deep chill, damp and penetrating, that only came near the ocean. It seeped through the cracks in the window frame and hit my face with sharp, stinging gusts. I hadn't gotten out of bed all day. Even taking a sip of water required effort from my entire body. Trembling arms, shaking hands, a cough that echoed like loose nails in a tin can. Suddenly, the sound of pots and pans clattered in the kitchen, followed by my daughter Sarah's impatient voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "Mom, aren't you getting up yet? What are we supposed to eat?" Her words hit me in the chest. I forced myself to sit up a little, swallowing to counteract the burning in my throat. "There's leftover stew, just heat it up. It's already made." Before I could finish, Sarah's voice pierced through the closed bedroom door, sharp and biting. "I've been supporting this family for 3 years now. When have you ever had to do without anything? And now you catch a little cold and just give up. I'm going to Mom's place. At least I can eat in peace there." The front door slammed shut with such force that the windows shuddered in their frames. I lay back down with limbs cold as ice, but my chest burning as if someone had driven a knife between my ribs. She left in fury because I hadn't cooked for one single day, and my daughter Sarah stood there in the doorway with a grim, stormy face, her eyes full of guilt and irritation as if I were the one ruining their day. "Why did you have to make her angry?" she muttered coldly. Then she turned and disappeared down the hallway without even looking at the mess left in the kitchen. I couldn't speak. My throat was closed as if someone had stuffed cotton and shame into it. For 20 years, since the day she was born, I had been like clockwork, never letting a single meal grow cold on the table, getting up before dawn every morning, cooking, washing dishes, folding clothes, washing their socks by hand, for God's sake. When Sarah was little and sick, I stayed up nights, making chicken broth, hovering like a more attentive nurse than her own pediatrician. When she had nightmares, I jumped at the first cry and rocked her back to sleep, terrified of disturbing anyone else's rest. But now, for being sick just one day, I had become a nuisance, a burden. I closed my eyes. I felt a tightness in my chest, and my nose stung as tears fell silently and hot, sliding down my cheeks without making a sound. My name is Ellen Walker. I'm 58 years old, and I live in the quiet town of Santa Clara, California. My husband died 3 years ago, leaving me alone with our adult daughter, Sarah, who moved back home temporarily to help with expenses after her divorce. What started as a few months had stretched into 3 years, and somehow I had become the unpaid household manager for both of us. Every morning I was the first to wake up and prepare breakfast. Every night I had dinner ready and warm on the table. I did the shopping, paid the bills, cleaned the house, did the laundry, and maintained everything that kept our lives running smoothly. Sarah had gotten comfortable. She stopped lifting a finger. She didn't even wash her own clothes anymore, just threw them in the laundry basket and expected them to magically appear clean and folded. And she never said a word of thanks. I suppose this was what daughters were supposed to expect from mothers. And I tried. I tried to speak up, to push back. I remember one night last winter when I had been at the emergency room with my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, staying there all night holding her shaky hand, while machines beeped and hummed. When I finally got home in the morning, I collapsed on the couch, still in my coat, and fell asleep. When I woke up, Sarah was standing in the living room with a look that could break stone. "Seriously, Mom? You didn't clean up? Look at this place." "What?" "A mess." She pointed at some empty sandwich wrappers on the coffee table as if I had ruined her life. My throat tightened. I explained in a whisper. "Last night I took Mrs. Patterson to the emergency room. I was too exhausted. Maybe it's time for you to help out a little too." She rolled her eyes and let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, please. I work all day too. If we all stopped doing things just because we're tired, we wouldn't eat, would we?" And with that, she shot me a withering look and stormed back to her room, slamming the door. I clenched my teeth so hard my jaw ached. I clenched my fists so tight my nails dug into my palms. But in the end, I didn't argue. I simply got up and started picking up trash. That day I learned to keep quiet, to swallow everything and stay silent. But today, I couldn't take it anymore. I had a fever. My throat felt like barbed wire. My whole body ached as if I'd been wrung out. I just wanted one day, just one, to rest. And even that was too much to ask. The house had fallen silent, that silence that vibrates with resentment. I could still hear the echo of Sarah slamming the door. Her cold, cutting voice still rang in my ears. Each word was like a blade stabbing under my ribs. What was I supposed to do? From the kitchen, the faucet was still dripping. I was standing by the sink, washing the pot I hadn't finished cleaning the night before, when I heard Sarah come in, her slippers dragging and hitting the tile. She looked me up and down. "Didn't you say yesterday that you were too sick to move?" I didn't respond. I simply covered the clean pot and looked for some potatoes in the refrigerator. She took a coffee cup from the cabinet and threw another comment over her shoulder. "You better pick up those magazines from the living room before I get back from work." After she left, I closed the kitchen door. On the counter was a pile of receipts, shopping lists, and utility bills. I started organizing them into plastic zip bags. My first step in a new system I had decided to implement the night before. Would continue cooking for now, but starting today, I would write down exactly how much it cost to prepare each meal. I didn't mention that I had also dug up the copy of the house deed from 2018. I found it at the bottom of the storage closet and sealed it in a new plastic folder. When the kitchen was spotless, I went into my room and took down the old leather suitcase that was stored on the top shelf of the closet. It had belonged to my husband. I never dared throw it away. Over the years, I had added a bunch of things to it. Photos, Sarah's school awards, tiny socks I had knitted for her the year she was born, and a bunch of bank statements and mortgage. Receipts I had quietly saved just in case. I pulled out the one on top, a record of the $25,000 I had transferred to Sarah 2 years ago. The memo said, "Car down payment." I printed a new copy of the transfer receipt and put it in a bright yellow folder. On the cover, I stuck a note. "Money I paid. Don't forget." Sarah didn't come down for lunch. I left the food on the stove on low heat and sat on the couch to review old emails on my tablet. One message caught my attention, an unexpected one from Diana, a former coworker from the lighting factory, and more importantly, my old companion from our part-time days building sets for the local theater. "The Santa Clara Theater will be presenting a light comedy for New Year's," she wrote. "We're looking for someone with experience to help design and build the sets. The pay is modest, but we can work hourly. If you're available, we'd love to have your help." I hadn't seen Diana in years. I stared at that email for a long time, my finger hovering over the reply button. A toy car rolled across the wooden floor and gently hit my foot. I bent down to pick it up and organized the pile of picture books scattered nearby. It wasn't that I didn't have energy to clean. I did. I had simply started choosing what was worth cleaning. That same afternoon, I went to the supermarket, but this time I only bought what was necessary, a refill of my prescription, and a small prepackaged meal for one person. When I came in, Sarah was leaning against the kitchen doorframe. Her gaze landed directly on the bag in my hand. "Didn't you get eggs?" she asked. "I forgot," I said. She frowned. "We were going to start giving more protein this week." Before she could finish, I had already stored the medication in my drawer, hung the shopping bag behind the door, and headed to my room. The door clicked shut behind me. From the kitchen, I could still hear her muttering, "Ellen, your memory is getting worse lately." I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the yellow folder again. On top, I stuck a new note. "Today the clock starts." A faint smell of burning was coming from the kitchen. I didn't move. The soft whistle of soup boiling reached me through the walls. It wasn't until Sarah's voice called, "Mom, is dinner ready?" that I finally got up to turn off the stove. Dinner continued as usual. Sarah checked her phone and complained again that the pasta was too firm. I didn't respond. I simply cleared the plates and took them to the kitchen. It was then that Sarah finally spoke, in the same careless tone as always. "Oh, right, Ellen. Didn't you say an old coworker asked you to help with a production? You're not thinking about that, are you? I mean, at your age, what help could you be? And it's so far away. Where would you stay?" She paused and added, "You should stay here and help me. I mean, if I moved to a better apartment, what would you do here alone?" I stood by the sink rinsing the dishes. The water kept running. I didn't say a word. She was already talking about being left behind, about how this house wasn't for me. Her voice droned on. "I told Mom this place won't make sense for us if I start that new job across town. You staying with the house would be useless." She was saying I would have nowhere to go. I didn't argue, didn't respond. I simply looked at her through the kitchen doorway and smiled. She didn't notice. She had already gone back to checking her phone. She had no idea that I had already responded to Diana's email the night before. "I'm in," was all I wrote. Simple, definitive. I didn't hesitate for a second when I hit send. Diana responded almost immediately. "Great. Our first production meeting is next week. You can help us test the lighting and props. We pay by the hour." I had built sets for over 30 years. I had hauled wood, hammered frames, and painted backdrops by hand. There wasn't a single person in that theater who would say Ellen couldn't handle it. But I had no intention of explaining any of that to Sarah. She didn't need to know what I was still capable of. She just needed to wake up one morning, realize the house was silent, and wonder, where did Ellen go? After dinner, Sarah went to her yoga class. She stayed on the couch looking at her phone. Halfway through a video, she suddenly looked up. Ellen, hey, I was wondering if I could ask you for a quick favor. I made an evasive humming sound. She was testing the waters. Tomorrow I have a meetup with some friends. Could you pick up my dry cleaning? I asked Mom. But there's an emergency at work and she can't leave. I was emptying the dishwasher, drying each dish with a clean cloth. Sure, I said simply. She exhaled in relief. Great, thanks. I went into the living room and pulled some crumpled sandwich wrappers from between the couch cushions, throwing them in the trash. You're pretty thorough, I'll give you that, she said, half distracted. I turned to her and smiled. Yes, I remember. More than you think. She blinked, confused by the comment, but I didn't elaborate. What she didn't know was that I hadn't stopped keeping track. Every grocery run, every dollar spent, the full name on Sarah's bank account. Every time Sarah gave me something to do, quickly. I had even taken a photo of the package she asked me to send last week. The recipient was her friend, but the sender name was mine. I didn't ask why. I simply, silently, began reclaiming everything that had been filed, signed, or borrowed in my name. Lately, every time she asked me to do her a favor, I smiled and nodded. And every time she assumed I had no other choice, I made sure to have the door key in my pocket. She thought I had nowhere to go, but what she didn't realize was that I had already gone further than she could imagine. The next morning, while Sarah was at her friend meetup, I put on a pair of worn walking shoes, slung a canvas bag over my shoulder, and quietly walked out the door. The theater had invited me to see a rehearsal that day to get a feel for the space. Winter mornings in Santa Clara were always damp and cold, that kind of cold that wrapped around your neck and made you walk a little faster. I hunched over and headed to the community center. A faded banner hung at the main entrance. Theater Revival Project. Rebuilding together. Diana was already waiting outside. When she saw me, she opened her arms wide. Ellen, you haven't changed a bit. I smiled. Oh, I've changed. My mind is clearer. My hands might be slower. She laughed and led me inside, chatting as we walked, pointing out the stage areas, lighting equipment, and fresh-faced kids handling the props. What we really need, she said, is someone who knows what to look for, who knows when to tighten a screw before it squeaks, or when to add a second layer of tape even if the first one seems fine. I nodded slowly as my eyes scanned the wooden frames and painted floors, structures as familiar to me as the drawers in my own kitchen. No, this wasn't the kitchen where I had spent the last decade washing dishes and cooking unappreciated food. But I knew how to make this space stand firm, just as I had held up that house for years, alone, with hands that never let it fall. When I got home at noon, the house was empty. I unpacked the groceries I had bought on the way back, just a few, vegetables, and carefully saved the receipts in the labeled plastic folders I had prepared in advance. I wrote down how I planned to use each item. Then I turned on my laptop and created a new spreadsheet. Walker Household Informal Expense Log, Private Record, was the file name. I began entering everything I had documented so far. The package I sent for Sarah's request for help ordering new shoes along with the size and product link, the last refrigerator restock including the date and complete list of items. Each link was backed up by a screenshot. Every time favor. This wasn't anger, this wasn't resentment, it was a complete, accurate work record, and it was mine. After dinner, I was washing dishes. Sarah finished eating, threw the last spoonful of chicken soup down the sink, and left without even looking at me. As she dried her hands, she made a casual comment over her shoulder. So did you really not find any eggs? Or did you just forget? I dried the lid of a pot. The store I went to didn't have any. I kept the receipt. It's written there. She didn't respond, but I heard it, that little tone of doubt in her voice. Later that night, after Sarah fell asleep, I sat at the dining room table with the laptop open again. I logged the day's receipts line by line. Lunch, chicken breast and mashed peas, ingredients $15. Just as I pressed enter, Sarah came down the stairs. Her steps were unusually light, as if she didn't want to be seen. She stood behind me for a moment before finally speaking. You've been recording all this. What for? I didn't turn around. I simply reached out and closed the window to protect myself from the cold. I just want things to be clear, I said. She took a deep breath and raised her voice. Are you tracking us? Keeping tabs? Do you think we owe you something now? I looked at her calmly. I'm not tracking you. I'm tracking what I've done. She stood there, eyes fixed on the bright screen. You're saving this just in case, aren't you? She said in a colder tone. In case you need it someday. I said nothing. She let out a bitter laugh and turned toward the stairs. The creak of old wood echoed through the silent house like a warning shot. I locked the document with a password and turned off the laptop. My fingers rested on the edge of the table for a few seconds before slowly pulling them away. After lunch the next day, I cleaned the kitchen counter. Sarah was lying on the couch with her phone in hand, eating chips while chatting with a friend on speaker. Lately, she's been acting really weird. She keeps records, takes photos, even records audio. Do you think she's planning to sue us or something? Oh my God. I said she was being cheap and she went crazy. She laughed easily and amused, as if she were telling a small, funny misunderstanding. At the dining room table, I finished copying today's shopping list, then got up and headed to the kitchen to marinate some meat. Behind me, she yelled, Ellen, make sure you cook enough steak tonight. Sarah loves it. And don't put sauce on the eggs this time. I said they were too salty. Okay, I responded softly. At that moment, Sarah came down the stairs, looking through her wallet. Mom, did you take my credit card? I didn't answer that question. I looked up and asked calmly, the last time you used that card, it was mine, wasn't it? You used it to buy the new controller, right? She paused, taken by surprise, and for once had nothing to say. I went into the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, and took out the meat I had marinated the night before. Just as I headed to the sink to rinse it, Sarah got up from the couch and threw a bag of dirty clothes on the chair behind me. Helen, could you throw this in with the laundry? We're leaving soon. I stared at the bag for a few seconds, then turned to look at the sink. The water was already boiling. Steam fogged up my glasses. I took them off and cleaned the lenses with the edge of my sleeve. Then she added, by the way, have you been in a bad mood lately? Sarah says you've barely talked. Look, we understand you're tired, but if you don't do these things, who will? Sarah was still standing by the dining room door looking at her phone. Yeah, Mom, don't get so worked up. This isn't a business. Nobody asks for detailed reports. I kept cleaning my glasses. Slower now. Mom, what are you doing? Sarah asked, with a hint of annoyance in her voice. I didn't respond. The pot slipped from my hand and crashed into the sink. Boiling water splashed. Some drops fell on her new dress. She jumped back with an expression that instantly twisted. You did that? On purpose. I looked at her, really looked at her. Sarah, I said quietly, did it occur to you that this pot was maybe never mine to wash? She froze. Sarah frowned. What does that mean, Mom? I left the towel on the floor and spoke in a calm voice. I mean, you eat without saying thank you. You put bills and purchases in my name. Now you throw dirty pots at me as if it were my job. I've cooked more meals, washed more clothes, and paid for more things in these 3 years than either of you. But I'm not your maid. Sarah opened her mouth. Ellen, are you menopausal? I let out a sudden laugh. It doesn't matter if I am or not. What matters is this. Starting today, I will no longer pay your expenses, and I will not wash anything that doesn't belong to me. Sarah's tone hardened. Mom, come on. Don't be like that. I'm calmer than either of you two, I said. Silence fell heavily over the kitchen. From upstairs came a small voice. My neighbor's little boy peeked out with wide eyes. Miss Ellen, are you angry? I approached and gently stroked his hair. No, sweetheart. I finally understood something. What? He asked. It's time to take care of myself. After dinner, I went back to my room, untied my apron, and sat on the edge of the bed. I picked up my phone. Diana's message was still open. Rehearsals officially start next week. You'll be in charge of props backstage. The equipment is a bit outdated, but you're more reliable than anyone else we have. I responded, I'll be on time. Tuesday morning at 7:30 a.m., I put on a navy blue work shirt, tied my hair in a low ponytail, and grabbed my canvas tool bag. From upstairs, Sarah yelled, Ellen, where are you going? You've been going out a lot lately. Standing by the door, I put on my shoes. I'm just fixing something. I'll be back before dinner. She didn't insist. Lately, she had become quieter, more cautious, especially after Sarah saw my account book the other night and muttered, Mom, don't be so paranoid. That's when I realized they would rather believe I was overreacting than accept that I had started to wake up. The Santa Clara Community Theater was located behind a modest neighborhood center. The stage was an old black box, and the lighting equipment looked rescued from the 90s. But as soon as I walked in, everything lit up. No dishes, no bills. Nobody telling me I should do this or should do that. Diana approached and gave me a strong hug. You look younger than the last time I saw you. I smiled. It must be because I'm not wearing an apron. We started with the first set, just the frame, and a piece of rolled painted paper. I sealed the edge with tape while one of the younger assistants rummaged nearby. He watched me work, and then whistled softly. You're really good at this. This job doesn't require talent, I said. Just practice. If you spend 30 years screwing in lights, it becomes natural. He sighed. I don't think I'd last 3 months. I smiled at him. Then you've probably never needed the paycheck this much. Before finishing lunch, Diana handed me a small envelope. Inside was a signed time slip and a $50 coffee gift card. It's just the beginning, she said. We have another production coming up. We're thinking of offering you the headset designer position. Aren't you worried I'm too old to keep up? She shrugged. I'm more worried about people who don't show up. You show up, I'll give you a chance. I put the envelope in my bag and felt something I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't that someone wanted me, but that I still wanted myself. When I got home that afternoon, it was almost 6 p.m. The kitchen was silent. On the table was a handwritten note from Sarah. You came too late. We went out to eat. Think about dinner yourself. And for once I didn't feel hurt. I felt light. So I grabbed my bag and treated myself to dinner out. I was learning to be kind to myself. And this time, I felt like I was living. Friday morning, Sarah was at the kitchen door looking at her schedule. Mom, can you go to the store later? I need healthy lunches for next week. I was sealing a bag of screws left over from the theater, preparing to take them in for repair. I didn't respond. She didn't pay much attention to it, simply turned around and returned to her bedroom, assuming as always that I was still the same Ellen who said yes to everything. What she didn't know was that I had already started moving my life piece by piece out of this house. The first thing I moved was my insurance. 2 days ago, I called my pension account manager and updated my mailing address and emergency contact. Sarah's name disappeared from the form. I replaced it with Diana's email. She's an old friend, I told the customer service representative. Someone I trust. My daughter is too busy lately. I don't want to be a burden on her. The woman on the phone didn't argue. She simply pressed some keys, made the changes, and confirmed the update. Then I canceled the joint credit card I shared with Sarah. Her name was on the secondary card. Not anymore. The second thing I moved was my belongings. I took down the old brown suitcase from the top of my closet, wrapped it in a soft towel, and stored it in a closet at the back of the theater's prop room. Nobody asked me why I had brought a suitcase to work. At the theater, everyone was too busy to worry about what you carried as long as you did your job well. At lunchtime, I didn't go home. Diana took me to a small Mexican restaurant around the corner. While we ate tacos and hot rice, she looked up from her food and said, You know, before you came, our old prop master was late almost every day. Half the time the backdrop hung crooked. Laughed. Well, even if I skip a day now, this place won't collapse. She looked at me with narrowed eyes, playful. I bet you're too good at this. It's not that I'm good, I said, putting down my fork. It's that I come from a place where if I didn't do it, nobody would. She didn't insist. She simply reached into her bag and slid a contract across the table, a part-time position for next season's production. Think about it. Take it home. I nodded and took it, feeling something settle inside me. Not excitement, not nerves, just calm, as if something was finally starting to fit. That afternoon when I got home, Sarah was on the balcony hanging laundry. She didn't see what I was carrying inside, a sturdy folder with the closure tightly shut. Inside were documents I had silently gathered, records of my financial contributions to the house, screenshots of bank transfers from the purchase, and a savings account card that was still in my name. Sarah didn't know anything about that account. It still contained $15,000, money I had gathered working 3 jobs the year she and her ex-husband were getting married. They never asked me how much I had. They simply assumed I would give them everything. But starting today, that card was mine again. I would reactivate it, and every transaction recorded just for me. Sunday morning, sunlight spilled across the kitchen floor, warm and slanted like a silent blessing. I had just finished the coffee maker when the doorbell rang. Sarah stood there, with a rigid expression. Behind her was her friend Mike, holding little Tommy, his face worn with fatigue. "Mom," Sarah said, "can we talk for a minute?" I nodded and let them into the kitchen. They exchanged a glance once seated. Sarah spoke first. "You recently canceled the secondary credit card." I set down my coffee cup and responded calmly. "Yes, I didn't want it associated with my name anymore." Sarah's face tensed immediately. "Helen, you didn't even tell us. We tried to pay yesterday and the card was declined." I stared at her. That's not my problem. Silence settled like thick fog. Sarah tried to soften things. We're not angry. It's just, if something happens, maybe we could talk about it. Oh, something is happening, I said as calmly as ever. This house. I paid for almost everything. I paid most of the down payment and helped finish your loan. I'm not going to kick you out, but I am going to recover what's mine. What I contributed. It's time that gets recognized. Sarah narrowed her eyes. What does that mean? Do you want to change the title? Are you trying to get the house back? Opened the kitchen drawer and put a clear folder on the table. Inside were copies. Dozens of them. Transfer receipts. Bank statements. Old screenshots annotated with date and time. Here, I said, is the transfer I made for your down payment. Here's the money order I sent for the kitchen remodel. And this, I touched the last page, is the mortgage payment I covered during your first year here. Sarah looked down, stunned. She had never taken the time to look at those numbers. I didn't save them to get anything back, I said quietly. I saved them to remind you that this house has been standing for 3 years. And during those 3 years, I've cooked, washed dishes, and taken care of your life. But my name doesn't appear on the deed. Sarah scoffed with a sharp voice. So what? Do you want your name added? Do you want the place deeded over? I stood up and handed them the folder. No, I'm not asking for anything. I'm just tired of bearing the consequences of decisions you made. Starting next month, I won't pay a penny. More for gas, electricity, or water. The mortgage? You handle it. Tommy's after-school programs? That's his parents' business. Sarah opened her mouth. Mom, sometimes we're a little tight. I know, I said, looking at her. But it's not my fault anymore. Who washes the pan? Who pays the bill? It's time that becomes clear. Sarah clenched her jaw. Sarah seemed to be looking for a lifeline. Then Tommy broke free from Mike and ran to me, wrapping his arms around my leg. Miss Ellen, you're not leaving, are you? I bent down and stroked his hair. Not yet, sweetheart. I'm just not going to be the person everyone imposes things on anymore. After they left, I went back to the kitchen, sealed the documents in their folder, and stored them in my bedroom drawer, not because I was hiding something, but because this time I knew exactly what I was protecting. That night, Sarah washed the dishes. Mike mopped the floor. The house was silent, disturbingly silent, as if no one lived there. And for the first time, I sat on the couch and watched an entire episode of a series without looking at the stove, without checking if the fridge needed restocking. The TV had no audience. I sat there with my account book in my lap, open to the last page. At the top, I wrote the date, then drew a single line below it, and after that I wrote nothing. Not because I couldn't, but because there was nothing left to track. What I owed to give, I gave. What was worth keeping, I kept. This book should have been closed long ago. Mom, can we talk? Sarah's voice came from the kitchen doorway. She had a letter in her hand. She approached and put it on the table in front of me. A formal notification from the bank. Sarah's name officially removed from the secondary credit card. They sent me this today, she said. Is this really happening? I looked at the letter. Yes, I notified the bank. It's just their confirmation. She rubbed her palms together, her voice lower. So you're serious. You're really pulling away. I looked at her and nodded gently. But you said you were just organizing things, she said, raising her tone. You said it was about putting everything in order. I closed the book and looked her in the eyes. Yes, I did sort it out. The sound of a dripping faucet echoed in the kitchen, soft and steady like a clock ticking. She stared at the letter with tight lips. Then she looked at me again, unsettled. Are you angry with us? I didn't respond. Why wasn't I? Anger meant I still cared enough to want change, to fight, to fix it. And now I just wanted out. Sarah didn't speak to me all day, nor did she prepare dinner. The kitchen was empty. Sarah ordered takeout. The three of them ate in silence. Tommy, my sweet boy, stuck a chicken nugget in a corner of the box and whispered to me, Miss Ellen, this is for you. I shook my head. Thank you, sweetheart, but I'm not hungry. He pushed the box toward me. You always said wasting food is bad. I smiled and stroked his hair. That night, under the warm light of my bedroom desk, I signed the theater's part-time contract. I had to return it the next morning. The next afternoon, I closed the door and sealed the final envelope. A list not for them, but for me. At the bottom, with firm strokes, I wrote 4 words. No more open tabs. I left the house key on the kitchen table. Next to it, a simple handwritten note. I don't want the house. What I gave you before, consider it a gift. From now on, separate lives, separate responsibilities. Ellen. 2 days later, I sat on the balcony of my new apartment, drinking a cup of tea I had made just for me. Sunlight warmed my knees. Beside, Me were next month's theater rehearsal script and a novel I had borrowed from the library. My phone lit up. A message from Sarah. "Mom, are you there?" I didn't respond. I turned off the screen. I got up and got ready to leave. The cinema was installing lights tonight, and they needed me for construction. The switch in the new rehearsal room was unstable. When operated, the lights flickered a couple of times before settling down. I stood backstage near the set scaffolding, with my tool bag at my feet and brush in hand. One of the young crew members placed the last panel of the backdrop. "Hey, Ellen," he shouted. "This is all yours. We're going up to install the lights." I nodded and bent down, smoothing the seam tape. There's something deeply quiet about this kind of work. Nobody asks me what's for dinner. Nobody chases me for bills, favors, or emotional labor. Just wood, fabric, and glue.